Iran launched the largest missile and drone strike in history, but Israel's response shocked the world, not with its size, but with the terrifying message it carried. This is the untold story of how the Middle East crossed into a new era of open warfare. In the tense and unpredictable Middle East, every action sets off a chain reaction. But nothing could have prepared the world for the series of events that began on April 1st, events that would push Israel and Iran closer to direct confrontation than ever before. On that day, Israeli F-35 stealth fighters carried out a strike unlike anything seen before. Their target wasn't a hidden weapons depot or a remote training camp. Instead, it was the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, a location Iran believed was untouchable. After all, diplomatic missions are considered sovereign territory under international law, and striking one is seen as crossing a red line few dare to cross. But Israel calculated differently. Inside the consulate that afternoon, a secret meeting was underway. Present were some of the most important figures in Iran's regional strategy. The commander and deputy commander of Iran's Quds Force for Lebanon and Syria, senior representatives of Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy in Lebanon, leaders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Gaza's second-largest militant faction after Hamas, and operatives from pro-Iranian militias in Syria, whose purpose is to prop up the Assad regime. In short, the room was filled with the architects of Iran's shadow war against Israel. Reports suggest they were discussing how to keep weapons flowing into Gaza, using smuggling networks through Syria and Lebanon, while also coordinating to relieve pressure on Hamas and Islamic Jihad during their battles against Israel. Israel decided this gathering was too dangerous to ignore. When the F-35s released their payload, the consulate was reduced to rubble in seconds. 14 people were killed, including 2 senior Iranian generals. The strike sent shockwaves across the region. For Israel, it was a bold message. No place was safe for Iran's operatives, not even a consulate. But for Tehran, it was a humiliation. High-ranking commanders had been eliminated inside what was supposed to be sovereign, protected ground. Iran's outrage was immediate. Many international legal scholars condemned the attack, calling it unlawful because it did not meet the standard of stopping an imminent threat. Israel countered that the meeting itself was evidence of future plots against its citizens. But legal arguments no longer mattered. Iran was not going to settle this in a courtroom, it was going to respond with force. What followed would be unlike anything the modern Middle East had ever seen. In the days after the consulate strike, Israel braced itself for retaliation. Troops were placed on high alert. Air defenses were tested. Allies were consulted. Yet, even with all this preparation, no one expected the scale of Iran's counterattack. Just past midnight on April 13th, Iran unleashed what is now considered the largest coordinated drone and missile barrage in military history. Estimates vary, but many reports suggest Iran fired around 350 rockets and missiles, and several hundred suicide drones. This was not the shadow warfare of the past. This was Tehran openly and directly attacking Israel, something it had never done before. But as the projectiles soared through the night sky, Israel did not stand alone. The United States, Britain, France, and even Jordan scrambled fighter jets and activated air defense systems to help intercept the swarm. The UAE and Saudi Arabia, though not directly firing, shared critical targeting data. For one night, an unlikely coalition came together to shield Israel. And the results were staggering. According to U.S. intelligence, over half of Iran's missiles and drones never made it far. Many malfunctioned, self-destructed, or failed to launch properly. The rest were intercepted in the air. American warplanes shot down at least 80 threats. U.S. Navy ships took out ballistic missiles over the sea, and Jordanian defenses stopped dozens more. Israel, of course, deployed its full arsenal from the short-range Iron Dome to the medium-range David Sling to the long-range Arrow system. By dawn, Israeli officials claimed that 99% of incoming threats had been destroyed. Still, the world was left asking, what exactly was Iran aiming for? Its targets appeared to be 3 strategic Israeli military sites. Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert. Ramon Air Base, another key facility in the south. an intelligence base at Mount Hermon in the contested Golan Heights. Some missiles managed to get through. At Nevatim, a runway was damaged, an empty hangar was struck, and a transport plane sustained light damage. At Ramon, missiles hit but caused minimal destruction. Mount Hermon's only casualty was a damaged access road, courtesy of a suicide drone. For all its scale, the attack caused no fatalities and only limited damage. Yet strategically it was historic. Iran had just demonstrated that it could directly rain down hundreds of drones and missiles on Israel. Even though the defense coalition held, the message was clear. The conflict had reached a new level. As the sun rose over Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened an emergency war cabinet meeting. The world held its breath, expecting Israel to respond immediately with overwhelming force. Instead, the cabinet urged restraint. Netanyahu promised a response, but said Israel would choose the time and place carefully. The waiting game had begun. For nearly a week after Iran's unprecedented missile and drone barrage, Israel held back. The world watched anxiously, convinced that a crushing Israeli counterattack was inevitable. Yet every day that passed without retaliation raised more questions. Was Israel deterred? Or was it planning something bigger? Finally, on the early morning of April 19th, Israel made its move. Iran had been bracing for a massive wave of airstrikes, perhaps an assault on its nuclear facilities, command centers, or even government buildings. But when the Israeli operation unfolded, it looked far more subtle, almost underwhelming. Many observers at first called it a limited strike. But once the dust settled, it became clear that this attack carried a message louder than bombs. The operation begins. Israeli warplanes took off from bases in southern Israel before heading north into Syrian airspace. Their first objective was routine for Israeli pilots: take out Syrian air defense systems. In southern Syria, several Syrian army positions were targeted and silenced. To many analysts, this looked like Israel clearing a path, just in case it wanted to press deeper into enemy territory. But the next stage was unexpected. Instead of launching dozens of cruise missiles or bombing runs, the Israeli jets released just a handful of weapons, missiles not commonly used in offensive missions. These were known as Sparrow missiles. The mysterious Sparrow. The Sparrow family of missiles wasn't originally designed for combat. They were developed as test targets for Israel's Arrow anti-missile system, essentially, dummy missiles meant to simulate enemy weapons in exercises. But Israeli engineers had modified them, equipping them with warheads and turning them into a long-range strike option. With a reach of roughly 2,000 kilometers, Sparrows can be launched from the air, soar high into the atmosphere, then dive toward their target in a steep arc. To the outside world, they look almost like ballistic missiles, but they're cheaper, lighter, and far harder to detect. On April 19th, a small volley of these Sparrows streaked eastward. Farmers in Iraq later reported pieces of missile boosters falling in their fields, proof of the unusual flight path the weapons had taken. The target revealed. Iran had reason to believe its skies were impenetrable. With Russian help, Tehran had deployed some of the most advanced air defense systems available, including the S-300 surface-to-air missile batteries, the crown jewel of its protection network. But Israel proved otherwise. 3 Sparrows slipped into Iranian airspace, evading detection until it was too late. In minutes, they slammed into their target, an S-300 air defense site near the city of Isfahan. The strike didn't just destroy a battery of missiles, it temporarily blinded a key layer of Iran's defensive shield. And the location mattered. That particular S-300 system was one of the primary guardians of the Natanz nuclear facility, Iran's most important uranium enrichment site, just 60 kilometers away. By hitting this site, Israel wasn't declaring all-out war. It wasn't trying to kill thousands of Iranian soldiers or devastate Tehran's infrastructure. Instead, it was delivering a precise, chilling message. We can reach your most valuable assets anytime we choose. And you cannot stop us. The psychological victory. On the surface, the attack looked small. 3 missiles, 1 air defense battery destroyed, hardly the massive retaliation the world expected. But to military analysts, it was brilliant strategy. If Israel had launched a sweeping bombardment, it might have dragged the region into an uncontrollable war. Iran could have felt compelled to escalate again, and other powers might have been pulled in. But by hitting just one carefully chosen target, Israel managed to prove its ability to penetrate Iran's defenses, undermine confidence in Tehran's Russian-supplied systems, send a warning that its nuclear facilities were vulnerable at any time. It was a surgical demonstration of power, a reminder that Israel doesn't need to level cities to make its point. And for Iran, the humiliation was severe. Billions of dollars had been spent on cutting-edge defenses, yet Israeli missiles still slipped through undetected. The strike shattered the illusion of safety around one of its most prized nuclear sites. What comes next? Despite the success of Israel's attack, the world was left unsettled. The rules of the game had changed. For decades, Iran and Israel fought mainly through proxies, Hezbollah rocket attacks, Israeli strikes on weapons convoys, covert assassinations of nuclear scientists. But now, for the first time, both countries had openly attacked each other's territory with conventional weapons. The barrier had been crossed. And once such a line is broken, it's difficult to go back. Israel had proven it could cripple Iran's defenses in a single strike. Iran had proven it could unleash massive barrages of missiles and drones, even if most were intercepted. The danger wasn't just in the damage caused, but in the potential for one lucky missile to land in a crowded city, or for one strike to hit deeper than intended, sparking an uncontrollable cycle of escalation. As Israel's jets returned home and the war cabinet reviewed the success, one question hung heavy in the air, not just in Jerusalem and Tehran, but across the entire Middle East. Was this just the beginning of a new era of direct warfare between Iran and Israel? By the time Israel's jets had landed back at their bases, the world was already buzzing. Analysts debated whether the strike on Iran's air defenses was bold genius or a dangerous gamble. Some saw it as a message of strength, others as a spark that could ignite the region. But one thing was undeniable. The Middle East had entered a new phase, one unlike anything before. Breaking the old rules. For decades, Israel and Iran had played their deadly game through proxies and shadows. Iran armed and trained Hezbollah in Lebanon, Palestinian groups in Gaza, and militias in Syria. Israel responded with covert assassinations, targeted strikes on weapons shipments, and cyber operations. Both sides inflicted pain, but neither dared cross into direct, open warfare. That era is gone. With Iran's massive April 13th missile and drone barrage, and Israel's precise April 19th counterstrike inside Iran itself, the unspoken rules of restraint were shattered. The conflict was no longer limited to back channels and surrogates. Now, state-to-state strikes were on the table. The implications were enormous. The risks ahead. Military experts warned that this new dynamic carried terrifying risks. All it would take was a single miscalculation to tip the region into chaos. If an Iranian missile got lucky and hit a major Israeli city, causing mass civilian casualties, Israel would feel compelled to retaliate with overwhelming force. If Israel decided to strike deeper, say, directly targeting Natanz or another key nuclear facility, Iran would see it as an existential attack, one that might justify all-out war. If Iran partnered more closely with Russia, it could develop a more sophisticated strike package. The April 13th barrage had largely failed, but it had given Tehran valuable lessons. With Russian expertise, the next wave could be deadlier. And then there was the coalition factor. Israel had survived Iran's onslaught not alone, but with the help of the US, Britain, France, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. This collective defense was effective, but also dangerous. If Iran chose to blame its failure on Western interference, it could expand its attacks beyond Israel, targeting US bases in the region, European assets, or even Arab neighbors. In other words, the battlefield could widen far beyond Tel Aviv and Tehran. Israel's strength and its limits. There was no question that Israel remained the Middle East's strongest military power. Its defenses worked. Its air force penetrated Iranian skies with ease. Its intelligence services stayed a step ahead of their enemies. But the April 13th attack had exposed something critical. Israel could not stand alone forever. Without American aircraft, British warships, and Jordanian missile batteries, the skies might have been overwhelmed. The sheer volume of Iran's attack showed that even a few successful hits could cause serious damage. Iran, meanwhile, was humbled too. Over half its missiles failed in midair. Drones were swatted down like flies. Billions in weapons technology had yielded almost nothing. But in warfare, failure is often the best teacher. Iran would adapt. It would try again. The uncertain future. As days passed after the April strikes, neither Israel nor Iran launched new major attacks. For now, both sides seemed content to declare victory in their own ways. Israel boasted that it had destroyed 99% of incoming threats and penetrated Iran's defenses with ease. Iran declared that its massive barrage had overwhelmed Israel and proved its capability to hit anywhere it chose. Both narratives were spun for domestic audiences. But beneath the propaganda, everyone knew the truth. The balance had shifted, and the threshold for direct warfare had been crossed. The Middle East now lives under a new kind of shadow. It is no longer a question of if Israel and Iran will strike each other directly again. It is a question of when. And when that next round comes, it may not be as carefully measured or as limited as the last. Because once the doors to open conflict are unlocked, they rarely stay closed for long.